Restoring Our City podcast. We are back with another episode. Super excited. But if this is your first time joining us, we have candid conversations on today's topics to help connect our community. And I'm with my brother, Jeswin Thomas. And I know, Jeswin, you talked about Advance Initiative a lot and how you've connected with lots of people in our community. And one person you brought up who's been blown up on social media, but at the same time has been doing some really great stuff, just sharing God's word and also connecting our community, is brother Alex Thomas. Alex Thomas. How are you, man? Welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you on. How's Colorado treating you, man?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys. It's really awesome to be here. I've seen your guys' stuff over the past few years, and yeah, we're just heading into spring now here in Colorado. So it's like kind of chilly, but the sun's out, so it's a good day here.
Nice. And Jeswin, tell us how you met Alex and how you kind of formed this connection.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we got a chance to connect at a weekend to explore, right? I think that's what it was called.
Yeah.
It was funny. I think, Alex, you just came out because you're like, there's a gathering of Indians and I already know my calling. You're already pastoring at that point.
Yeah.
All of us here are trying to discern our calling, but you just wanted to be around other Indians. Could you say, what brought you out there? Where does that kind of heart come from?
Yeah, definitely. So it goes back to, so that was what, February of 2023, Jeswin? So in November, the year before the Advanced Conference in Dallas, same kind of thing. I heard about it. Pastor Linton Daniel from Metro Church in Dallas, the day before the conference, he was like, "Hey, don't know if you're going to be at this conference." And it was a Thursday. I was going to class. I was in seminary, and I hop on a plane the next day, come to Dallas, literally know nobody in that room, and then meet the guys, and then like, "Hey, in February we're doing this thing called a weekend to remember." I was like, "Sure." I mean, I'm already on staff at the church. I would love to be in the room. So that's kind of been the recurring theme for me. Go to Advanced Conference just to be in the room. The next event in February just to be around people, because I'm not around those groups quite often. So
Yeah.
to be around like Indians in ministry is just super powerful for me.
I feel like that's the takeaway. Like, what's the Indian population in Colorado Springs?
Yeah.
Not high, right?
Colorado Springs, we've had a lot of like tech companies come here. Amazon's here. There's a big UPS distribution center here now, and so there's a lot of non-Malayalis coming. So there's a lot of Indians here, even in our neighborhood. You'll see people walking around, and you're like, "Oh, okay." But as I've grown up here my whole life, and when I was a kid, I was the only Indian in class. The only other Indian in my high school is my sister when she was a senior and I was a freshman. So Denver has more. Denver has quite a bit more, but Colorado Springs is a very small community.
I find that that's the story of so many people. So I was talking to Stephanie and even Pastor Tony Thomas, who's down in Atlanta at the moment. And again, growing up, she'd say I'm probably one of the only Indian people I knew, but more recently, those are some of the fastest growing places where South Asians are flocking to. And it's just crazy to see the explosion.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I think it's opposite in Dallas, right? I've heard people telling me Frisco, it's the majority, and Caucasian population is the minority. It's crazy how widespread our people are across the country.
You're in the Molu Promised Land, all right? Everyone's thinking not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a little India out here. But Alex, I'm excited to have you on because obviously you're a speaker, you're a pastor in Colorado, and obviously you have a great social media presence too, talking about denominations and different cultures. I'd love to dive into that, but tell us a little bit about your background in terms of how you kind of maybe came to faith and what started your ministry journey.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Colorado Springs, very white city. My mom's family immigrated to Denver in 1980. So my family is all in Denver, just an hour away. And so growing up as a kid, I grew up at an American evangelical church. It's actually the church I work at now. So grew up here, and then we would drive to my Upper Denominations house every Sunday after church because they hosted a church at their house. And so after church here, we'd drive up there. So every weekend I would see my family. But I grew up primarily in the white church context. And so that was just kind of the norm for me. My parents got divorced when I was young. And so splitting up, they lived in the same city my whole life, but we would go to try to figure out different churches, and life changes, so we try to figure some new stuff out. But it was really when I was in high school that I came to know the Lord in a really personal level, because some friends of mine had started a Bible study at a different high school, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to be a part of this Bible study?" And at that point, I was 16. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a Christian. Both of my grandparents are pastors. My mom works at a nonprofit. Like, I would consider myself a Christian." But then going to this Bible study, it was all of us were athletes. None of us were white, and it was just a different context than a youth group at church. And we really just opened up the Bible and said, "Okay, what should we talk about?" And so there's like 10 of us and my friends, like at the living room of my friend's parents' house. And it grew from 10 to 15 to 20, 30, 40. We grew to like 80 people, 80 high schoolers across the Colorado Springs area. And just meeting in the living room of friend's parents' house. And it was at that point where we're like, okay, we got to move to a bigger location. And so for the rest of my high school years, we were at a community center that let us meet there for free every Sunday. And there's over 100 high schoolers from all over Colorado Springs. People would come from Denver. People would come from a city called Pueblo, which is south of Colorado Springs. And it was just us leading it. Like, all right, well, this is meeting a need that we feel needs to be met. And that is when I felt the direct call, not just to pastoral ministry, but to people who feel as if church isn't for them, Christianity is not for them. That's a white person's religion. That's whatever else. Yeah. So when I was 16, 17 is when I felt the call to the Lord, and also just a deepening of my own faith.
That's awesome.
So went to school for it, and the story continues, but that's the initial piece.
Man, that's just awesome to hear. I think all of us have a similar heart in that regard, where you see the power of kind of, smaller communities that really can grow, but really for people that feel disenfranchised by maybe their church experiences, or just like you said, feeling like Christianity is white man's religion, the power of being in some of these spaces to really shape faith for people is just such an incredible, experience. So, currently, do you feel like you're serving in a context, I know, out at LifeGate? So can you talk a little bit maybe about that, and maybe some of your young adult experiences as a pastor? Do you feel like you get to kind of serve that similar calling that you felt even in shaping your own faith? And how's that been?
Yeah. So, when I was in so I went to do my undergrad biblical studies, and I went to Denver Seminary, and the story of getting plugged in there was kind of just a family friend who goes to the Marthoma Church was like, "Hey, there's an Indian pastor who leads an American church." And I was like, and it was in Denver. So I was like, I don't know how I haven't heard about this guy. So I DM Pastor Narup Alphonse on Instagram. This is in 2020. And then, we met up at a Panera Bread the next week. And from then on, I was 21 when I met him. And immediately he just saw something in me. He's like, not only did he see something in me, he believed in me enough to say, "Hey, I'm going to bring this out of you." So, he's like, "Just come and see if you want to be a part of this church. Like, I'm not going to force you into it. Make sure you like it first." And so, I was working at Target while being in seminary full time. I was also helping out with the college ministry. And then a year of that, I came on staff and launched the young adults ministry at LifeGate Church in Denver. And it was a phenomenal experience. It's my first time being a pastor, first time preaching on a consistent basis. And I learned so much about what it means to be a pastor. I learned a lot of what it actually means. Like when you're in college, undergrad, like, I want to be a pastor. And then stepping into it full time is totally different.
Man, that is the best sliding into the DM story I think I've heard.
It's true, man. That's one thing about me, especially since I grew up with no Indians in my vicinity. I've met so many people, and I've made so many connections just off of saying, "Hey, like, you're Indian Christian doing something cool. I would love to connect with you." And that's literally how it went.
That's fascinating. I think, kind of bridging the gap here a little bit, Jeswin, just talking about, growing up in a multi-ethnic church and not being surrounded by Indians, but now you have this passion to reach and connect South Asians, and you're sharing a lot of historical insight onto the denominations that people who grew up in those churches are in and living and breathing it, right? So how did that tie in? Where did the passion for the South Asian community come in?
Yeah. It was around the same time when I was in high school. My friends and I would share everything about our Bible study via Snapchat. And so we'd post on Snapchat and Instagram, and all my cousins in Dallas are all Marthama. And so we would just kind of have conversations, like they'd be interested in it. And I didn't know, and at that point, I didn't know anything about any Indian church except for IPC churches. And so I just started having some really preliminary conversations when I was a teenager. And I realized that not just from like not being around Indians did I miss out on culture, I also missed out on a lot of the religious heritage of our people. And so over the years, just having a deeper and deeper yearning to be around Indian Christians, because I'd heard, okay, my last name is Thomas because of the Apostle Thomas, and that's all I knew. Then I went to seminary, and I was, doing the deep study of historical theology, Reformation studies. But in most Western seminaries, there's no, mention of Eastern Christianity whatsoever. Yeah. And so I already had these ideas in seminary. I'm like, okay, I know what's happening in India a little bit. So I finished seminary. I go to India for 6 weeks just by myself, kind of traveling around, doing some different ministry opportunities there. And it was around that same time where it was that trip that I got to visit some of the churches that the Apostle Thomas established. And so it's the Naranam Church in Tiruvalla. It's considered the mother church where he first went and baptized these Hindu Brahmins, high caste Hindus. And I was like, man, this is insane. Wow. So then I started visiting some other churches, and it was, all this is happening, and I realized there's so much history here that I love. I'm a history nerd. That's why I love the Bible. That's why I went to seminary. I'm like, there's so much here that people just don't know. Because the same thing is happening in India. Like, we have all of our church splits and unfortunate realities here. Yeah. There's like CSI church next to CSI churches in India. Marthama church next to Marthama church. And they don't intersect. They don't coincide with each other. So the biggest thing for me, it all comes down to unity. Like, yeah, I didn't grow up in the Pentecostal church, but my grandparents helped. They're very foundational for it in the US. Yeah. And I just realized, like, well, Marthas think this about Pentecostals. Pentecostals think this about Catholics and Orthodox and all this stuff. I'm like, what the heck is happening here? Like, we all play basketball together. We all can hang out together. But as soon as it comes Sunday morning, 9 to 12 p.m., it's like, oh. So for me, it really just comes down to boiling it down. Like, yeah, here's what the text actually says. Here's what this church doctrine actually says. Here's what the website actually says. Yeah. Like, you can read it for yourself.
Yeah, it brings the unity to people. We have more in common than we think. And then it's funny. It's a great analogy about basketball, right? Like, we don't, everything goes out the window, right? We just hoop. We're all friends and we hang out with each other. We probably pick each other up, give each other rides, sponsor each other's fees.
You're right. One of the things about the Denver community, so I was living in Denver for many years while I was working at LifeGate. So the Denver community is super small. So there's one Marthama church, there's one Orthodox church, there's one Yakoba church, there's just one of each church. And there's probably like 20 families. 20 is like the most you'd find at a church. It's like on the low end, average is probably like 6 or 7. And the thing about that is all of the kids, we all grew up together. So we would go to the Marthama VBS in summer, and then we'd go to the Orthodox VBS. And then we'd all be at each other's house for birthday parties and Easter and everything. Yeah. So one of my best friends, he's Orthodox. One of my other really good friends, she's Marthama. And we're all always together. And what I realized is that it's not the case everywhere else. Like, some of my friends from one denomination don't even know what the inside of the other church of a different denomination looks like. Yeah. But all of us, like, if it's a funeral, if it's a wedding, whatever it is, we're always in each other's spaces. Because of this community has held on to the fact that, hey, we're family and we came here together. Because it's still so small. It's not like huge where it's like easy to point fingers. It's like, hey, we're still the small community. Like, everyone has still grown up together and has stayed together. And so I think that's where my heart has come from, of like, yeah, my best friends don't go to the same church as I do.
Right. Yeah.
And we're still hanging out all the time. So,
man, that's awesome. I feel like that's so much like all of our stories, right? Like, I totally resonate with that, where I have so many friends within all these other denominations. As one, I think that is such a I don't know if that's a universal experience, but I think a lot of us could really relate to that.
Yeah.
And maybe I want to kind of jump into a little bit of what you're doing now. So you talk a little bit about bridging that gap between these denominations.
Yeah.
What is it about history that you think really brings us together? Because a lot of people that have been following you, and I've loved learning a ton from just your videos. But what is it about that lens that you feel like brings us more together than anything else?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if that's the one thing that brings us more. I think it's an easy on ramp because other than like Pentecostal churches, Orthodox, Catholic, Marthoma, specifically in Malayali Christianity, these like our friends when they were kids, starting at like third grade, they're taught the history of their church. I have the different Sunday school books from the different denominations, and they're taught like here's the history of St. Thomas, and they're getting this at like 8 years old up until high school senior year.
Yeah.
And so I realized that like my Marthoma friends, they know what they're talking about when it comes to the Marthoma church. But then like the Orthodox, they know the Orthodox story, the Catholic know the Catholic story. And so history is super important because people know it, but they don't know how it coincides.
Yeah.
Like how directly tied to the Orthodox church, the Marthoma church is. And all the traditions and the rites. And so it really just started one day of me saying, I don't even know what the first video I made was. I think it was about the St. Thomas coming to India. Because Americans love that. When they hear that Indians have been Christians for thousands of years, it's like, what? That's so cool. And so I was like, okay, start here. But it just seems like it's working. I don't really know exactly how or why, but it's working because potentially people have heard maybe some part of it, and they're like, oh, well, here's what I know. Here's what I want to know more of. So I don't know, man. It's working. I'm grateful because I'm also learning so much about the history of Christianity in India, like what it really means to be a St. Thomas Christian. What does that look like? What is the traditions? And
Yeah. I think that's awesome because, now that I live in Texas, it's a completely different world for me. And I've been, my background is leading small group with a bunch of Indians over the years. But now that I'm in Texas, I'm leading small group at my church. It's a multi-ethnic church, but
yeah,
we've got a lot of country Caucasian folks that I've never been. I used to live in the city in Chicago, right, Jeswin? Like different demographics.
yeah,
And the guys that I lead group with, they're like, "You're the first Indian Christian I've ever met." And they mentioned Thomas. They're like, "Oh, I know he went to India, but that's about it. This is strange. I've never met an Indian Christian." And this is like country Dallas, right? So it's interesting because history is so valuable because it can really shed light on the global impact of the gospel, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, just like you mentioned, Alex, it's so valuable, especially for us that are coming from Pentecostal backgrounds, because I totally hear you when you say, yeah, especially a lot of my Zero friends that really get taught through CCD the history of their church. I feel like, especially for some of us, within Brethren, maybe Pentecostal communities, we think, the church started in Acts 2, nothing happened for 2,000 years, and then Azusa Street happens, and bam, we have a church again.
right. Which is so crazy because I think just being a not just Indian Christian, like Kerala Christians we have such a deep history. And I think there's two things here. I think, unfortunately, Kerala Christians kind of overly dilute the space of Indian Christianity. So a lot of people don't know the stories of like Christianity in Tamil Nadu. Like Thomas died there. So obviously there's St. Thomas Christians there, even like Northeast. And so there's that. And then also like just for the Pentecostal side of it, it's fascinating to learn that the Azusa Street revival happened right after the Pentecostal movement exploded in India. So the Indian Pentecostalism, like it came out of the Brethren movement before the American missionaries came. But again, what happened before that and before that and before that? It's interesting to read K.E. Abraham, founder of IPC. There's a quote from him and some other leaders of the IPC church. I won't directly quote it because I can't, but essentially they're saying that Indian Pentecostals are St. Thomas Christians because the Apostle Thomas was actually Pentecostal. He was Pentecostal because he received the Holy Spirit in Acts. And so from then, because he received the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, every church that he established was essentially Pentecostal. So in one sense, it's beautiful that no matter what, people are going to find the connection to the Apostle Thomas.
Right.
Like, I'm glad they're not canceling it out. They're not saying, well, we're not that. They're saying, no, we actually are that. You know, it's up for debate. I won't say either way, but yeah.
That's awesome. I think the history of it is really interesting, and obviously you're learning and unpacking all these things. But has there been a historical fact or anything that's jumped out at you or surprised you in just kind of this pursuit of understanding and unpacking this background?
Man, I don't even think it's just one thing. I think, you know, just the whole span of it. Like, I've learned so much about just, okay, there's two types of Catholic, there's two types of Orthodox, there's these other offshoots. And even for me, like, I've had so many misconceptions of what the Jacobite church is compared to the Indian Orthodox church, like what this church believes compared to that church. And I think I've had my eyes open to so many like realities rather than things based on opinion. And you know, Indians, regardless of religion, are very opinionated people. And so I've heard, just my whole life, I've heard, oh, well, Catholics do this and Jacobo do this and Orthodox do this. And I'm like, oh, okay. But then actually to see it and understand it and learn about it, it really has, like, my mind has been blown, even to it's like too long to talk about, but the legal disputes and the really harsh fighting between the Malankara Orthodox Church and the Jacobite Syrian Church. They look the same. One uses more Syriac than the other, but there's like really harsh division there, and it's crazy. It's like, man, it's really unfortunate that this is happening, but it's inside for me to know.
That's I was gonna say, I think I was gonna ask you, kind of jokingly, but what's the best denomination out there? Let's just put it to bed. Just call it out there. What's the best one and what's the worst one? Stop all the infighting.
I think, based off of what everybody else says, now I don't claim IPC, but my grandparents are found like really important to it, so that's my heritage. But to hear what my like Martha Orthodox friends say about us is so funny. It's really funny.
Yeah.
So,
oh man,
it's funny because Jeswin, this kind of brings me back because Jeswin and I grew up in a Pentecostal church, but we've been to multiple churches, and the last churches that we went to together was such a blend. I think you and I, Jeswin, were the only Penti people in that church. It was primarily South Asian, mixed of Taiwanese, lots of different backgrounds. And I mean, just hearing you talk, Alex, it just reminds me of that group of people because they all came with this genuine faith, multitudes of backgrounds from a South Asian context, but it was so genuine because they had to leave some of the traditional upbringings that they held on to just follow Jesus and let's figure it out, right? So I love that blend, right? Because history is important, but the pursuit of Jesus is more. And yeah, I love hearing that.
Yeah, and it's just funny as you were talking to Alex, I'm just thinking, man, they had church splits back in the day too, and just thinking about which one is probably the most, in your opinion, what was probably I don't know if it's the most crazy church split that you've had to read about, or maybe one division that you'd say, hey, this was actually a division that I would say is a good division, right? Just even thinking about divisions in maybe in a good light. What is there one that stands out and says, hey, this was one thing that was necessary. It was great to see, and two churches are now thriving because of this unity.
Yeah, I think my mind goes specifically to the Syro-Malankara Catholic Church, which was a part of the Malankara Orthodox Church for many, many generations. And then this man named Mar Ivanios, who was an Orthodox priest, essentially, he was tasked with figuring out how the Orthodox Church could be in communion with Rome. Like, there's many conversations prior to that, but the reunion movement is what this was called. And so the Malankara Orthodox Church sends this guy, Mar Ivanios, to figure out the way to be connected to Rome. And then they were. So then this church essentially split from the Indian Orthodox Church and became the Syro-Malankara Catholic Church, which They dress the same as the Orthodox bishops. They look like some of the traditions look the same, but they're in full communion with Rome. And so the head of the Syro-Malankara Catholic Church is actually a cardinal, and so he's a part of the College of Cardinals and all that. So church splits sometimes, need to happen from a historical perspective because the Syro-Malankara Catholic Church is thriving across the globe. But it does make me sad when I see just like Indian churches, man, split after split after split. We've seen it, and it's not normal. Like I've only worked at American churches. I've worked at two different American churches as a pastor. When I talk about churches splitting and how normal it is in our context, the shock and the surprise from any American is like, whoa, what? Like that's a big deal. Like it is a big deal. It's become such a small thing that's like, oh, we're just gonna go over here anyway.
Yeah.
Like it's really is heartbreaking.
No, 100%. And I like that, at least from what you just shared, right? There are things that might cause this unity unnecessary. I think of, maybe like Paul and John Mark back in the day. There was a necessary separation and both of them thrived. And at the end of the day, they found a way to kind of come back together. You see that toward the end of Paul's letters. But at the same time, like you said, that the amount of splits and how normal it is in our community for sure is something that has to be odd.
It's sad. It's really, and it sets up, again, this goes back to my whole passion. It sets up the younger generation for failure. Yeah. Like, oh, well, you can just leave a church if you don't like the pastor. You can split. It's just not okay. And it's from the top down, right? Yeah. Like sometimes the environment has been created. The table has been set in such a way that's like, hey, you can leave whenever you want.
Yeah. And when you find out what they split over, it's like a mixer and I didn't want to spend $2,000 or whatever it is. These arbitrary reasons that impact a generation, potentially from even pursuing their faith, right?
Which honestly goes into why so many millennial South Asian Indians specifically, and hopefully not Gen Z, but millennials and Gen Z leaving Indian church, because it's like Indian churches, this is some perspective, but it's like, oh, Indian churches don't actually care about faith. It's all just who's who and who knows what. And, and that's like the biggest reason I'm doing what I'm doing is just to help our people stay in churches and not leave because of some unfortunate experiences that are real. Like there's justified reasons for people to be disheartened.
And I totally hear you on that. I feel like, at least in our generation, like you said, Alex, it's either people that have left the faith altogether or people that have left the Indian church in pursuit of something either more multi-ethnic or just definitely, not Indian in any way, shape, or form. But as you're kind of going through this journey of presenting, the history of just the Indian church in general, could you share maybe some success stories of how you're seeing this making an impact and even maybe, opening people's minds to be like, hey, you know what? I'm proud of my Indian Christian heritage as I'm learning some of these things that you've been sharing online.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I said, I'm full time. I'm on staff. I'm a pastor at a church, and so that's my everyday. But then this has been really exciting just for me personally because to see, young Indian Christians who may otherwise like not even be active on social media in a way that would say that they're a part of an Indian church. I've been, messaged and comments on the post of like, this is so encouraging to see someone talk about my church. Like if someone talks about your thing, like in a positive way, it would make you happy, right? If someone's talking about your wife or your kids, your parents, it's like, oh, those are my people.
Yeah.
And I'm honored that someone. So that's one of the goals is just to highlight, because obviously there's negative things in every nook and cranny, but it's also like, hey, here's the really beautiful parts about churches. Because honestly, what I'm hoping to do partially is help restore people's like imagination of what the church can be. Because man, I'll hear stuff like, oh, well, they're all just cultural Christians, or this church, they don't actually, whatever people want to say. But whether we like it or not, people have been Catholic and Orthodox and whatever else for thousands of years, and it's been working. Yeah. And so why don't we look into it? So there's that. I think some success stories have also come into, there's quite a few different Asian American Christian initiatives across the country at different universities. And from my experience, it's mostly East Asians, Southeast Asians, theologians and thinkers and writers in that space. And so I've kind of been introduced and invited to some conversations to represent the South Indian and South Asian perspective, which is really cool because I'm thankful for the Korean church, the Chinese church, and all the others from East and Southeast Asia. But I think it's also important that the South Asian community has some representation in those rooms as well. So just stuff like that. I mean, I love it. Like I said, I get to learn a lot. I get to have conversations with people that I otherwise wouldn't. Like I interviewed an Achin from the Syrian Malabar Church, Catholic Church, last week, and I had no reason being in his office talking. But it's like, hey, I just want to help our younger generations. Can we sit and chat? And so, yeah.
I love that. I think the way that you're using social media, maybe, kind of switching gears a little bit, but at the same time, you're connecting community through history and highlighting our background and empowering people to learn more. But you're using social media to do that. So I'm really curious about how it's changed maybe your approach, because obviously you're growing a following and you get these comments, and want to talk about that in a second. But how do you think you've engaged social media differently, where you're able to connect in different avenues where we didn't have these technologies in the past?
Yeah. I mean, it opens up doors to people that, I'll never meet or may never meet. But like I kind of what I said earlier, like when I reached out to Pastor Roop via Instagram, some of my really close friends I've met from Instagram, and we're doing this thing together. And so there's that. I was pretty against doing anything big on Instagram for a while. Especially as a young adults pastor, I come across plenty of people who are, Christian influencers, and I hate that. Like, I think it's pointless. And so the goal is not to like become that, but really it just seems like a tool right now to bring, like, where else are we going to find information about the history of Indian churches?
Sure.
Like, I'm like a YouTube nerd, so all my YouTube history is like the history of this church, this church, this church. There's nothing about anything that we have experienced. So I think it's important to find, like, in anything that anyone's doing, like, if there's an empty space, fill it. Like,
yeah,
something needs to be done. Let's do it. And so it's been really helpful. Like I said, made connections, and even some of the messages of like, I'm Orthodox and I never thought that I could, believe in Jesus the way that I do now. And so thank you for talking about it in a way that's not disheartening or putting us down. And so I've learned so much. And I've also seen people like really stand very firmly on their thing, their church, their doctrine being right. And I'm not setting out to find right and wrong. Like, that's not the goal. Like, you can think it's right and wrong, but that's not my goal here at all.
Yeah, I love that. Because I know, like, your approach is very valuable. It's educational. It's not just trying to blow up an audience, but it's really connecting community, and at the same time, empowering them to learn their history. And so Jess and I were looking through your Instagram, love the videos, love the historical value that it adds. But then we also see these comments. And so I'd love to get your take, because we're going to do the special segment where we read the comments. And I'd love to just kind of get your take. And I know you probably can't respond to all of these things. And but it's so interesting with social media. People just have a platform. Everyone has podcast equipment now. And so they can kind of voice their opinion, maybe us included. But
hey, luckily the comments on this have been much better than what Jimmy Kimmel puts out on Me Sweet. All right, so never got to that level.
That's just.
But I wanted to read a couple comments, and I wanted to get your take on it, because it seems like people are standing on their ground on something. So I just pulled up a couple. I wanted to read it. One person said, "Denominations are really sad to see. Wish we were able to have unity amongst the churches." When you hear something like that, how do you take that and respond?
Yeah, that sentiment is very true. That's something I often would say. Because, there's not going to be a Methodist section in heaven, a Baptist. You've heard that whole thing before. And I think even more so in the Indian church. Like, I don't know if you guys have been, you probably, you have, you're from Chicago Pentecostal churches. Like, when they talk about Catholics as the nominal church, it's like a regular thing for our older generations to like say such a derogatory word
Yeah.
about fellow Christians. Like, oh well, the nominal churches, they'll be around. I'm like, how can we say such a thing? And so
Yeah.
there's no there's reasons for denominations, right? Like
Mhm.
this church believes this and this church believes that, and they really aren't eye to eye in something. So it can be necessary for that church to exist like that and that church to exist like that. But that comment, I would have, from what I know about a lot of the commenters, it could potentially be from someone who's Catholic or Orthodox, speaking from the one church, one true church perspective.
Yeah.
Which, to be honest, is something I wrestle with
Mm.
from the historical perspective, historical theology. It's like, man, when Catholics or Orthodox talk about there's one church and it has to have apostolic succession and under and directly connected to an apostle, like sometimes I look at our big old churches,
Yeah.
like which I work at, I'm like, would they recognize this as a church?
Ooh.
If the Apostle Thomas walked into my church, would he say, this is the worship of Jesus? Would he know it? It's like, man, I don't know.
That's
Man,
good. Yeah.
The music sounds good. We take communion every week from a little cup and all this stuff. Like the preaching is phenomenal, but is it reflective of the historical tradition of what a church looks like? So
Yeah. I said we're about to get like a letter from Paul, right? Like he's about to write a letter to Chicago and Denver. We're all about to get smacked.
How many do we have? 40 in Dallas? 50? I don't know what it is. Crazy. That's yeah. Go ahead, Jeswin.
Maybe a tangential question to that. Then I mean, I totally hear that wrestling, and yeah, that's a great perspective. There's not going to be these sections in heaven, but at the same time, like I guess instead of focusing on why the denominations exist, because they do, and some of the necessary elements of that, how do we maybe foster a sense of like an ecumenical spirit amongst these different denominations? Like, do you have any thoughts on that, perhaps?
Yeah, so when I was a young adults pastor in Denver, one of my goals was seeking unity among young adults pastor in the city, and so I would on a monthly basis just get other young adults pastors together from around the city, and we just sit and pray. And so the thing is, I would email every young adults pastor, whose ever email I could find. Now, let's say I invite 30 people, maybe 6 would come. Maybe they don't see the email, maybe they don't have time, whatever it is. But there's a reality that some people will do whatever it takes to seek unity and build it, and others, not that they don't think unity is important. No one would say that, but also unity it's like there's a cost to it.
Yeah.
It takes physically stepping outside of your building, your comfort zone, what you know to be like true and right. And so I think denominations are important. Maybe some of them are not, but if Jesus says in his high priestly prayer in John 17, like that we need to be unified, I don't think that we can skip over that. So I think in non-denominational or other Protestant churches, I think finding ecumenism is easier because it's like, oh, well, we actually do believe in a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
You guys wear a robe, we don't wear a robe. But like in Protestant circles, it should be extremely easy to sit down with each other.
Yeah. No, I like that. It too, just the ways that you've strived to create that ecumenical spirit. And I think, sometimes where I see it a lot is really in a lot of these college ministries that are parachurch organizations. You see a lot of students that are coming from all these different backgrounds. I was involved a lot with design movement through Crew, but I know that's the same case for InterVarsity as well, where you do see that sort of ecumenical unification under a parachurch ministry, which is just really awesome to see in this generation.
Yeah, I think one of the ways I'm doing it, so I we have a small group in Denver. We meet once a month. It's just all the young, it's not even just Indians, all the young South Asians. So there's Kerala Christians, like Tamil Nadu, other parts of India. Then there's Pakistani Christians, there's Sri Lankans. And everyone's like, one's Catholic, Orthodox, Martha, this, that. And so it's really just, hey, let's get together for a small group. So that's how we're seeing it in my own context. It's not like as big as a college ministry, but these are people in the workplace that otherwise may not interact with people like that. And so,
yeah. And I was like,
at all costs, unity is my goal. Like whatever it takes. If it's through the vehicle of history on social media, so be it. Like I'll do it if it's gonna
Yeah,
be.
it brings people together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I love that spirit. There's got to be a sacrifice. Somebody's got to actually take that burden to bring and rally the troops together, right? Despite our differences. And kind of going back to some of these comments, not to read a ton, but there's some that people, just there's hate online, and I think using social media as a vehicle to connect people somehow attracts the vipers and the broods, right? There's one comment I read, says, please do proper research. You're giving all the wrong information, dude. Delete the video. It just seems like these are the YouTube.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. What's your approach to that?
Some people will comment something crazy and rude, and you can't comment back. Like if I've tried to comment, it's like, oh, so and so does not accept comments.
Interesting.
What there? So, I mean, sometimes I'm like, oh crap, did I say something wrong? Because obviously I'm not like formally trained in the history of all these different churches. I'm gathering on my own, so I've not been 100%. But also, I know that I do my research quite well.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people, that is coming from the perspective of someone who is from one church. And so if I'm portraying the history of a different church, it's like, that's not right. That's our version of history, revisionist history or whatever it is. Like, that's the true history. So one of my mentors, Joel Mutamale, told me, he's like, don't even read the comments. He's like, don't even click on the comments, which I don't find is like, I don't get discouraged. I laugh. Like, I don't reply to any, even if it's a positive comment. I don't.
That's good.
I'll leave
sound advice. And I bring it up just because there's like there's distractors and detractors from unity, which is a crazy thing, right? It seems like we all want to pursue unity, but
I made a video about Eastern Orthodoxy and Oriental Orthodoxy, which Indian Orthodox churches are Oriental, meaning further east. And I had an Eastern Orthodox priest, like very well-known guy, like hundreds, thousands of followers, comment and essentially say that these churches are heretics. And so I say, hey, thank you for commenting. Do you know any of these people personally? Like, you're an Eastern Orthodox priest. Everyone knows you on Instagram, but do you know a priest from the Malankara Orthodox Church? And he's like, I went to seminary with some of them, great guys, but heretics still. And I'm just like, oh. And that's like I'll be honest, that's a super Eastern Orthodox way of viewing others, is that they're heretics, they're wrong. Eastern Orthodoxy that's their thing to do, is to call other people wrong. And that's something I've noticed, but I'm like, whoa, that is really hard, because just there's history of the Council of Chalcedon, or we Chalcedonian, non-Chalcedonian, whatever. There's details there that can't be missed over. And also to just blatantly, someone who has a lot of followers say that, oh, they're heretics. Now that leads people to view any Indian or Syrian Orthodox, Ethiopian Orthodox church, oh, well, I don't know anything about them. So-and-so said that they're heretics, so they are.
Wow.
So my biggest thing is like, go and see. Like, have you been? And like, I'm doing the same. I've gone to Latin Mass. I've gone to Eastern Orthodox Vespers. I'm like, I'm going to figure it out for myself. Maybe I don't agree with it, but I'm going to go and see it. So it's like, have you been to a Syrian Orthodox church? Have you been to a Malankara Orthodox church? Have you experienced it? Well, no, I haven't. Well, don't talk to me about it then.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think, and I bring it up too, not to bring up negative comments, but like your approach to it is so healthy to learn about people, because you never know the perspective of someone else unless you kind of sit in their shoes, right? And see the reverence that people have from the liturgical sense or some of the traditions. It's actually really humbling to see some of the things that I didn't grow up with, that people pursue God in a different way. Yeah. But I would have never seen that if I didn't get to befriend and have relationships with those people, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Going towards the future, obviously you got this presence on social media, but you're pursuing unity. And I think the goal, obviously, to spread the gospel. What's your vision for strengthening, the ministry among South Asians? It sounds like you're getting small groups and people like that together, but what do you see big picture? If you can see the ideal picture of it all working as successfully as possible, what does that look like?
Man, without any guardrails or anything like that, my goal is to so I'm in the process of creating a ministry right now that is focused directly on this. A lot of people have experienced things like South Asian University or design and other, college parachurch ministries. But a lot of us are not in college anymore, or like me, didn't grow up in that, didn't go to college in that. And so just as I've surveyed the landscape across the US and also having the opportunity to go to other countries and see like Malayali Christianity there, it's like, man, the biggest thing is unity. So how can we create something that isn't being done right now, that is not just different for the sake of being different, but actually seeks to bring people together and have conversations that otherwise wouldn't be had, and also get the voices of those who have gone before us. So like the Joel Mutamales, the Nurup Alphans, others around the country who are leading at a very high level, but also are very passionate about our community. And they're like, these guys are my friends. And so it's like, that's the really powerful thing about Indian community is like it's on its best day. Like these guys can be at the top and they'll still, if you call them right now, they'll answer.
Yeah.
And so that's the goal, is like to take the model of how our relationships here like this and just create that. So it's still working out the kinks of what it looks like. But it's like creating content and resources and conferences and just ways to be more involved, because it's now not it's our responsibility, but it's not for us,
Right.
or Gen Z and Generation Alpha and whatever's coming after that. And because if they get here to our ages and it's like there's no such thing as Indian church, or there's no reason, it's like, man, someone failed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's powerful just to think about that, right? Like if they get here and in a similar spot, you're right. It's not just someone failed. I feel like you could say we failed, right? In many senses. But and as we're kind of having this conversation, I hear you talk a lot about thinking about, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, whoever might come next. Do you see maybe qualitative differences from them and their maybe church experiences that you don't necessarily see in the millennials and people of our generation? You could say like, hey, there is a hope and for change coming because of what I'm seeing when I look into the future.
Yeah. I think before I answer that, I was just pulling up a verse. So there's a verse from Esther, chapter 8. She says, this is kind of like the verse that propels me forward with all this. She says, for how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? And so for me, that's the driving factor. That's the verse that propels me, because Queen Esther is speaking on behalf of the Israelites and before their destruction in front of King Xerxes. So it's not the same extent whatsoever, but it's like, if we don't step in, destruction will befall upon our people. And it's not imminent. It's not, we can step in and figure it out and fix it. And so, Jess, to answer your second question, it's like the younger generations are hungry across ethnic groups. A lot of people will say like Gen Z is godless and all this stuff. It's not true. I hate when people say that, because you go to churches. Like when I was working at LifeGate, our youth group, my best friend was a youth pastor. The youth group was the front row, the entire front row. They're writing notes vigorously. They're like hands up in worship, and they're all younger than 18. And so then that's like a big, like that's a small look into the bigger picture of high schoolers and college students around the country. There's a huge revival. Like this is not one-to-one correlation, but like my generation doesn't drink as much. My generation doesn't smoke as much. My generation, and like a lot of common things for other generations are not as common for us. And in the same way, church attendance and biblical literacy potentially might be on the upswing for younger generations. So unity is a part of that. That's why I love these college ministries. When I was in college, some of my friends, they started ministries from, I went to school in Phoenix, and like to see these giant college ministries and to see like Phoenix, Arizona, right off the campus of ASU.
Yeah.
Like there's hundreds of college students like turning their hearts to the Lord. And so I'm encouraged. It's like honestly looking up, like, hey, parents, grandparents generation, you guys need to follow the Lord, because we're going to. That's my life. That's literally my life. Like this is the way I'm going. And I hope, I pray for you, but I know that my life will be drastically different than some of my uncles, aunties, elders.
Yeah.
So I really am encouraged. I feel like we're all just small parts in this grand scale of, specifically in the U.S., seeing younger generations really rise up.
I love that. I mean, I was watching your sermon, and when you talked about living in harmony with one another, and you use the analogy about just being in harmony, not everyone's the same. Not every musical note is the same, and that's how we have harmony. I love what you said. It's a harmony represents a deep interconnectedness between things that should not really be connected.
Yeah.
What a beautiful picture, right?
Yeah.
And as you're talking, Alex, and I know we'll wrap up soon, but there's this weave the story that God's writing through generations between all of us. Before we jumped on, you said your grandparents founded ICAG back in the day.
Yeah.
I met Jesus in the pastor's office at ICAG when the pastor talked to me about the story of Nicodemus. Like when you're talking to me, I just feel overwhelmed because of what your grandparents did, right? Planting that church, and me as an 8-year-old kid getting to know Jesus through the people that led that church. Now we're all across the country, right? Like the reason why I wanted to have you on, and I think why Jeswin and I love these conversations, is because like I got 2 kids. Sometimes he wanders in here and he watches me edit this podcast, and he's like, "Wait, who is that?" Because I want him to watch not just the influences that of this world, but like people who look like him. And that's a big part of it too, right?
Yeah.
That actually are talking about Jesus, like when he's 20 years old in college. That's the thing I think about when like we hit end and we publish this podcast. It's like, how does the next generation know Jesus?
Yeah.
And it's up to us, right? Man, I love this. This is why we do what we do, right?
That's powerful.
Such a powerful story, Alex. I think I would encourage everybody, check out your website. Not just check out the videos to blow it up so he can sell you some merch, but it's more learning about the foundation of our faith, because once you peel back the history, you see this beautiful story of this gospel, how it's applied to so many different types of walks of life, right?
Yeah.
Alex, so happy to have you on. Looking forward to this is not just a one-time thing. Hey, love to just connect with you, record something, and that's it. Love to connect with you, empower you, and encourage you. Outside of those for every negative comment, there's people here cheering you on in the background, right?
Yeah. And
but-
I'm just excited to see where you go in the future. I mean, sounds like some exciting things are in the works. How can people follow, what you're up to next and just connect with you as well?
Yeah, well, before even that, thank you guys so much, Joe. That story is insane. That's crazy to hear. There's the generational interconnectedness is insane. So I'm blessed to be the grandson of my grandparents, and I'm honored to continue their legacy. Hopefully, I'll keep you guys in the loop 100% about what's coming. I'm excited to kind of roll it out. But yeah, Instagram, I write pretty often on my blog, try to stay very, in the academic mind since finishing seminary. So I have a Substack blog, but my website is just alexanderkthomas.com. So everything's on there. But yeah, this is awesome. I love what you guys are doing. Super, super encouraged by you guys.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it, brother. And we will definitely share out all the socials and look forward to seeing everything you're up to going forward.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys.
Okay. Thanks, guys.